Greetings and salutations, Duck at HomeCon, and welcome to Gardening with Jade and Becquerel. Jade stands for gardenGnostic. Perhaps you know me as Jade Harley, Witch of Space, Daughter of Glyphia, and Certified Pup Chi by Dave Strider. I am accompanied with my trusty radioactive doggy double beast Becquerel. I have a variety of topics to cover, so let us begin. That was pretty lame, but yeah. Fact 1. Basics of plant and biology. Plants are living organisms that have unique processes to gather their own food. They are in the kingdom Plantae and are eukaryotic organisms. Plants use photosynthesis to self-sustain. I believe that it is important to understand these mechanisms, as when you can better understand these mechanisms, you can understand your plant's needs so that you can better take care of them. Plants tend to have leaves, a stem, and roots. They work in a shoot system, which I tend to think a little bit about the scaffolding in Minecraft. They use the xylem to flow water through the plant and phloem to carry food throughout the plant. Leaves have what is called a lamina. Think of the word laminate, which is Latin for thin or layer. This is attached to the petiole, which means little foot, attaching the leaf to the stem. Within the leaf, there is chloroplast, which chloro means green, surrounding the structure of the plant, and chlorophyll, a compound that creates that vibrant green color and helps synthesize sunlight into sugars. The plant has guard cells, called stomata, which open up to collect carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. CO2 and water are then used by the chloroplast to trap photoenergy from sunlight. Now this happens through the Calvin cycle and what we call ATP. But that's a much deeper topic. If you have any more questions on that, I can try and answer them, but it's a bit more complicated than your basics. Oxygen is expelled into the environment, and the sugars are used in the plant to grow. It's important to understand plant taxonomy if you're trying to study botany. But gives us a universal scientific language in plants and animals, so no matter what language you speak, you're able to know the Latin names and be able to communicate. And of course, there's, lots of slang terms and English names and other languages that come up with all sorts of names for different plants. The domain that I mentioned before of eukaryotic cells is called eukarya, which that is the first taxonomy label. It is then Plantae, then the division, then the class, the order, the family, the genus, and then finally the species. First two things when it comes to identifying plants are whether or not it is vascular or non-vascular. Think of a human vascular system. We use our heart to pump out oxygen throughout the plant. Some plants don't need those xylems and to be able to do that. Instead, they actually just sit there and collect oxygen and water, similar to how a frog does. An example of this is moss, liverwort, or algae. The second classification is vascular plants. These ones do have vascular systems. It is then classified into spore producing, which tends to be ferns, as they reproduce with spores. Second classification from that is seed producing. It is then think of the name vessel in angiosperm. It is a vessel because it uses the seeds as a means to reproduce. It spreads its seed or vessel in various methods, such as winds, animal, water, or explodinating. Non-flowering plants are called gymnosperms, which means naked seed. This is because this classification refers to things such as needling trees that are tall, such as firs, pine, and spruce, which use things like pine cones to be able to spread their seeds, which is a completely different structure. Some common questions that I'm asked are these things a plant? Is lichen a plant? No. Lichen is a completely different organism that is different from the plantae family. Are mushrooms a plant? Also no. Plants, mushrooms, and fungi are not plants and they do not have similar structures. Although, as we discussed earlier, things such as those spore producing things such as ferns utilize mushrooms to be able to reproduce. But that is a different thing. Common angiosperm classification you will hear are herbs, most trees, shrubs, bulbs, and parasitic plants, which is also pretty silly and interesting. But those names aren't exactly, those Latin names we talked about earlier. As most living beings do, or at least I hope most all living beings do, utilize certain chemicals to be able to use their functions and mechanisms. Plants use things such as nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and boron within their processes, as well as many other minerals, similar to humans. Fertilizers are used to increase plant growth by adding these nutrients. One of my favorite ways to fertilize is through composting, as the mechanism improves soil health very efficiently. When dead organic carbon-based material is added to dirt with water, little critters will eat it up and poop out nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and all those other aforementioned nutrients, which are absorbed through the roots. I think that plants are exceptional pals, as you're able to spend 13 years on an island taking care of things and giving yourself something to do, while also creating a very lovely environment. With squiggles and Beck, of course, but anyways.
Oh, look, you can lay down with me. Oh, he's showing his belly. So, look at these little critters here. These are, what I believe to be some type of burr. And Beck's been brushing up against them, and then the seeds latch onto him. Pretty silly, but...
Yeah. One of the things is that if you have fungi on your plants, one of the things I like to always add is vinegar, as it's very acidic and can help get rid of those things without damaging the plant too often. I also like to check the soil pH balance, especially when you're working in a greenhouse because it's a controlled environment. You can do this by buying test strips, which will turn a certain color to indicate the pH balance. Plants actually have a very interesting mechanism to release hydrogen ions that actually lower the pH balance in the soil when they're doing photosynthesis. Yellow leaves can indicate not enough light or nutrient deficiencies, which means something is disrupting the photosynthesis process. It can also mean your plants don't have a way to drain water. If there's too much water in your soil and there's not a way to drain it, this can cause mold. One other thing is checking your gardening zone. Depending on where you live, it may be harder to grow plants. This is because of things such as humidity and how fast winter comes. Physically touch your soil. I do this fairly often. See if it's too dry. Are the leaves beginning to droop? Has it been wet for an extended period of time? This way, you can kind of see where your plant's at and how it's doing. Here's some questions. So, I was asked about pet-safe plants. And the thing that I have to say about this is that depending on what your critter likes to chew on, that makes a difference. But some plants tend to be toxic. So I would avoid any sorts of ivies or like that mother-in-law's tongue plant. But things that tend to be fairly safe, first of all, if you want a hardy plant that your critter can't chew to death, then any kind of house plant, but you have to be careful just in case they're toxic, of course. I'd recommend spider plant, ferns, Hoya plants, Christmas cactus, which are flowering, which can be very pretty, orchids, and most true palm trees. Tips and tricks. My experience is that pets tend to chew on whatever is fun to chew on. Beck, for some reason, likes to chew stinky grass out in the lawn and wild strawberries, but he doesn't touch anything else. What plant gave you the hardest time to grow? That would actually be the citrus trees. That is because the place where I live is extremely, extremely dry, whereas these plants prefer a hot and humid environment. I like to have them though, and it's kind of a test of my skill, I guess. Can you use the dirt in your backyard to grow plants? Yes, I do it all the time. But the thing is, it's probably not as fertile depending on the dirt. There's lots of different types of dirt. Sometimes dirt can be full of clay, sometimes dirt can be sandy, and so sometimes that can be beneficial, as a more sandy dirt provides more drainage, which the citrus trees like. Or perhaps a clay mud will actually lock in more moisture. I would recommend being able to fertilize that soil and of course wetting it before you use it. How to start gardening if you're new. Well, to tell you a story, when I first started gardening, I just took some seeds and put them in dirt and put them in a window not knowing anything. They didn't grow. But I tried again. It's a lot of what, just seeing what sticks and what doesn't. One of the things is that sometimes seeds just don't germinate. And of course, um, giving them an environment that they're comfortable in is important, and all these other factors. But I mean, I always choose that the most best beginner plants are um, cacti and succulents, as well as your common house plants, and then going from there. The other thing that I recommend is that what exactly are you gardening for? Are you gardening to be able to harvest? Are you gardening for botanical experiments? Are you gardening so you can have a pleasant atmosphere? When you understand what exactly you're gardening for, you can then create certain goals to be able to go forward. Another way that I tend to drain some plants is that this one, for example, if I were to take it out and show you, there's a lot of rocks at the bottom. The rocks add kind of a layer that the water can fall into without it being like clogging up the rest of the plant and the soil. Handy dandy mechanism. This in here are red clover that I started a couple days ago. Let's see if I can show you guys. There we go. There's some of that slight germination in there. It'll take about 5 days at most. Now, you have to rinse and soak them pretty often because with starting them in the water, they tend to create that mold easily, which would not be good to ingest. But in Persian culture, we actually start lentil seeds or beans and we put them in water and create grass. So we put it in the river during Eid, which is Persian New Year, and when we put it to carry all of our bad luck away. So we don't really care if those ones mold, but they make a nice grass. The sprouts that these red clovers will be able to eat are very nutritious, as the sprouts have very many yummy nutrients in them compared to a larger plant. So here's what I wanted to show you guys. These are a variety of things that I've eaten in the past couple weeks. 3 peach pits, five cherry pits, and an olive pit. Now, these I'm gonna have to be able to let in the sun and dry out for about a week before they can grow. The seed in these ones are actually inside, but it'll naturally open up when I put in the soil. I have many of these different ones because unfortunately when you buy most fruit from the grocery store, because of all the chemicals they use, they have a very hard time germinating. And by germinating, I mean opening up and sprouting. So I have 3 and 5 of them because that way I'm able to at least hopefully get one. Fortunately, I couldn't get any more of the olive, but we'll just see. If not, we'll have some pretty cherries and peaches. Because it's summertime, it's actually seasonal for them, which is why I was able to get them in the store. So hopefully they'll be, better quality. I want to create the emphasis that you don't exactly even need to use a pot. I sometimes use cardboard boxes, I use paper plates, I use anything I can find that holds dirt. Now these are some things that I've started seeds in. Hollyhock, which is a perennial, lobelia, which is a perennial and has lots of medical benefits, sensitive plant, which when you touch it, it goes bzz, and then Nicotiana, Kiana, which is also called Ola Lonely. And look, it's all pretty and droopy like that. I picked up perennial plants because I really like perennial plants and I like them to grow, and also because I'm helping make the yard go. So these will create some lovely germination hopefully, and I basically stick my finger in, put the seeds in. Now you want to be careful with watering because when you water new plants, the soil can be all rough and tough and it can disrupt the seeds and break them down, and you have to also be careful with watering new plants, so using kind of a light showering or things like that so that they don't, it doesn't hurt the plants or dislodge them in any way. Whenever I plant things, I tend to wet the soil first because when you put water in new soil, it'll just make the soil like rise up and go everywhere because of buoyancy. We're now going to take this very long ivy all the way to the place that I'm going to water it. Now I'll show you. This one actually has like a screw off one, so it'll keep draining here.
Alright, hello everybody. We're now in my outdoor bed. One of my outdoor beds. This one is the main one where I tend to grow things like pumpkins and watermelons, my rhubarb, tomatoes, mint, some of my lilies, a couple of other things, peonies, which are one of my favorite flowers, and such. But anyways, this is also my compost pile, which I see I had a little watermelon to feed those good bacterias and stuff, sugar, and lots of composing carbon materials. So I have a little bit of a treat for y'all today. And I have prepped a already wet soil. Like I said before, it's good to wet the soil so that the seeds don't fly everywhere when you water it. And we're going to be growing catnip, or also called catmint, which has a very silly Latin name, which the first time is actually Nepeta, after our dear friend Nepeta Lejon. I'm going to stick on gardening gloves just because, which I would actually probably do it without any gloves on, but uh, you can really do whatever. But so one of the things that you have to be worried about when planting things is that you have to be worried about the direction of the sun. Of course, you know, those leaves will be able to do their work to create a great angle, but I tend to want to grow things that so the main thing about placing your plants in a very good structure so that they get the most sun is to have them facing south. So this house actually faces north. So the front of the house doesn't get a whole lot of sun. But see, the sun starts, appears to start in the east and then swing south. And then you get that large cycle that goes south. So it's very beneficial to have your plants in a south facing window. So the seed depth is about 1/8 of an inch, which you can find on pretty much any seed packet. But so I'm going to poke about holes, which are generally that size. My grandpa always says that you don't really have to follow the rules, but you can just make the rules better. Tear open the seed packet. And then I'm going to pour them out into my hand and sprinkle a couple of them in because just in case 2 or 3 of them don't germinate, the others will. Then of course cover it up. And I'm gonna place it actually here in my garden because it's a hardy perennial. It won't be as fragile as some other plants. Becquerel, come here. Come here, puppy. Beck, come. Come here. Alright, everybody. That's just about everything that I have for you. I hope that you guys have a lovely SAHCON. And Beck hopes you do too. So, have a great rest of your day and have fun. I'll probably be in VR chat a couple times to meet y'all and answer any questions that you have.